Was Jesus really a flesh and blood rabbi? Did he marry and have children? And was his wife somehow smuggled out of Jerusalem by boat to southern France? Well, it really is one of the great mysteries and conspiracies of our time. But is it really true?
I think that Jesus and Mary were more likely to have been married than not, and certainly there would have been offspring.
We know that it says salus filia, so we know he produced a daughter.
So this is reinforcing the fact that he was married?
Yeah, and that he had children.
The protagonist in the Catholic Church's movie is a man named Jesus Christ, and if anyone else interferes with that, then they're going to airbrush them from history, which is exactly what they did.
What is the evidence to prove the bloodline theory?
I think there is a tomb. I think it's at least Mary Magdalene's tomb. It may be more. There may be the son of Mary Magdalene, and it may even be the body of Jesus.
Many scholars, authors and historians believe that Jesus could indeed have married Mary Magdalene. Certainly in southern France there's a strong tradition that she arrived near Marseille carrying her child, whose descendants then married into the royal French Merovingian line, creating a sang royal, a royal bloodline, the real Holy Grail.
Although the hard evidence for this is sketchy at best, some scholars believe that if Jesus was a rabbi, as the New Testament states, then it would have been very unusual for him not to have been married. Indeed, in the so-called Gnostic Gospels, which were not included in the New Testament and only discovered in 1945, there are a number of intriguing references of Jesus and Mary Magdalene having some sort of close relationship.
In the Gnostic Gospels, she is very much described as his lover. It was an illicit relationship, and it comes over very clearly in the reaction of the men of the mission, the famous 12 disciples, who really didn't get her at all. They just could not get her. And actually, she was a bit like Yoko Ono in the Beatles. She was the cuckoo in the nest. She was, a sort of divisive character among the men. She was actually, if reading between the lines, very much the power behind the throne where Jesus was concerned. And Jesus clearly adored her.
What if Mary was the special one? What if Jesus Christ attached himself to her for purposes of his political gain and esteem? What if he was the +1 of Mary Magdalene?
As an ordained priest, how does your view on the whole bloodline theory sit with your faith?
I can reconcile my belief that Jesus is truly man and truly God by believing that he was married and that he had children and that he experienced as part of his terrestrial humanity, which was genuine and complete. That's his Godhead and his humanity perfectly combined. As a celibate, he is not a complete man.
The Bible, though, is quite dismissive of Mary Magdalene, wouldn't you say?
I think that we have some rather underhanded editing by the people who put the canonical books together, and that what is often referred to as the New Testament Apocrypha and some of what came out of Qumran on the Dead Sea Scrolls is very informative and is well worth studying. It seemed to have been the purpose of those who put the canon of New Testament scripture together to have avoided references to Christ's marriage and family.
There is this extraordinary little interchange again from the Gnostic Gospels, because you won't get any of this in the New Testament, but in the Gnostic Gospels you get this extraordinary thing where one of the men, probably Peter, goes to Jesus, because they're always complaining about her, and he says, "Lord, why do you love her more than you love all of us? Why are you always kissing her on the mouth?" And you think, come on boys, why do you think?
Intriguingly, some people believe that Leonardo da Vinci left a subtle hidden message about this relationship in one of his most famous works, The Last Supper. According to the New Testament, the person seated at the right side of Jesus was John the Apostle. But the figure that Leonardo drew looks, well, distinctly feminine, even with the hint of breasts.
In the New Testament, it makes the point that at the Last Supper, the young St. John is leaning against Jesus. In Da Vinci's painting, this character couldn't be leaning further away from Jesus. It's as if they're joined at the hip, but, you know, the characters are forming a sort of V shape between them. So he's obviously saying, look at this is not the biblical version I'm giving you. You know, this is something I really want you to look at.
The idea of a relationship or even a marriage is controversial enough, but there are those who go much further and believe that Jesus didn't ascend into heaven from the cross, but actually survived the crucifixion when a deal was struck between Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus' uncle, and Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor at the time.
There's actually a couple interesting aspects to the crucifixion that no one seems to really talk about. One of which is nobody was allowed near the crucifixion. By all accounts, people who are observing it from far away. Second of all, the very location they're observing, we're told, apparently was in Christ's uncle's garden, Joseph of Arimathea's garden. And when he is taken down from the cross, nobody can really make out much of what's going on because they're so far away. He's taken down and put into Joseph's tomb. So nobody but the people who are immediately in front of him would have been able to ascertain, was he alive, was he dead, was there a sedative on the sponge, how was that orchestrated? They just would have seen it from a distance. And you know what this does? This solves a real political problem. And the political problem is that Christ had overstayed his welcome. He was a rebel that the Romans could literally do without. But because his uncle was so well connected with this government, this Roman government, that it would appear, and it's not that far-fetched, it would appear they struck a deal. Let us make it look as though we killed him. Then you get him out of town.
According to the bloodline theory, Mary Magdalene and possibly Jesus, who was said to be a direct descendant of King David, were helped to escape to southern France, where their children married into the Merovingian line of French kings, creating a holy Davidic bloodline, which then carried on down through the centuries. Solid proof of this is sketchy, but what's interesting is that there was a group called the Despacini, meaning of the Lord, who claimed that they were direct descendants of Jesus and who were said to have been hunted down by the church in Rome in the first few centuries AD. Not only that, but there were Jewish communities in southern France at the same time, some of whose rulers also claimed to be descended from this Davidic bloodline.
I think the whole legend that they went to the south of France is actually probably true. There's a couple reasons for that. Not only did the Romans have many settlements in the south of France, but Pontius Pilate had a residence there. So if you struck a deal with the Romans and you need a place to hide, then why not set that up in advance? And what makes it a win-win for everybody is that where he goes is French Gaul. French Gaul is the center of the Jewish world outside of Jerusalem. So it only makes sense.
So, what is the truth about this bloodline? Was Jesus Christ really the Son of God who ascended into heaven from the cross? Or was he simply a rabbi, a healer, a revolutionary who married and had kids and was eventually killed by the Roman army for opposing their beliefs? On one hand, you have over 2,000 years of church dogma. On the other, quite possibly, the greatest cover-up of all time.
I know that there's no proof to support this, but if Jesus was a descendant of King David, and if his followers in Jerusalem believed he was the Messiah, I don't think that it's a crazy notion that Pontius Pilate would have agreed to a plan to smuggle him and his partner out of Jerusalem and send them as far away as possible. When you add the fact that there are long-held traditions of Mary Magdalene, perhaps with a child, coming ashore in a boat near Marseille, the notion that she and maybe Jesus fled to this area isn't quite as outlandish as it sounds.
According to local legend, the story that Mary Magdalene and her child came to southern France can be proved because they claim they are buried here in the village of Rennes-le-Château.
According to the story, the village priest at the end of the 19th century, Berenger Saunier, stumbled across documents during the renovation of his church that led him to the location of something very important. Maybe a treasure or relics, or maybe, some say, the tomb of Mary Magdalene and even Jesus himself. Either way, it's a fact that this poor country priest became fabulously wealthy almost overnight before meeting a sudden and unexpected end.
Way back in the 1890s, an impoverished village priest who was trying to live on a stipend that's equivalent of £6 UK a year, or 50 pence a month. Think about it, say just under $1 a month to live on, and suddenly becomes the richest man in the south of France and spends money like there's no tomorrow. He completely renovates the church, builds himself this magnificent villa, the Villa Bethania, puts statues round the church, and just spends and spends and spends.
So where did the money come from?
That remains an unsolved mystery. There is one school of thought that says he was blackmailing the Vatican because he had discovered what purported to be the tomb of Mary Magdalene, with documentation suggesting that Jesus had not been resurrected but had survived the crucifixion, had gone off to the south of France with Mary Magdalene, where they'd raised a family and given up on all the messianic ideas in Israel, and that having found this out, in other words, Saunier was able to say to the Vatican, by the way, I found that the whole of your church is founded on a mistake, and therefore, if you pay me, I'll shut up about it. So that he was allegedly a blackmailer.
Author Robert Howells has been researching and investigating the Rennes-le-Château mystery for over 20 years. He's convinced that there is something of great importance buried there.
I think there is a tomb. I think it's at least Mary Magdalene's tomb. It may be more. There may be the son of Mary Magdalene, and it may even be the body of Jesus. There is this idea that there is a family tomb down there, that in fact Mary Magdalene, who's thought to have come back to France, actually brought the body back with her.
Jesus' body?
The idea that Jesus was buried there certainly comes up. It's never cleanly stated, and it cannot be proved unless it's found, and then how do you prove it's actually Jesus? But the idea that there is a family tomb of his children. There is, the priest painted the altar in his church, and in that painting is Mary Magdalene in a local cave. You can recognise the landscape as being local. Outside, Mary Magdalene next to a grave with 2 live shoots coming out of it. So there was this idea that Jesus is buried there and that he had 2 children, and that Mary tending to the tomb who would also be buried there.
Lots of people have dug around Rennes-le-Château and have searched for it but not found anything?
No, it's not an easy place to search. Many tombs around Rennes are limestone caves, and there are myriads of them. She could have been buried anywhere in the Rennes area, and it does seem odd that so many churches in the south of France traditionally were dedicated to Mary Magdalene, as was Saunière's church at Rennes.
So, could hard evidence of this bloodline, the tomb of Mary Magdalene and maybe even Jesus, really be here in the foothills of southern France? Well, would-be Indiana Joneses flock to this remote area of the Languedoc every year, believing they are. And Pat Jockel, a karate instructor from Germany, is one of them. He believes that the priest Saunière did leave hidden clues to an important secret in the decor of his church.
Wow.
So this is a church.
It's a lot more colourful than I'd imagined.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's a bit overdone, I would say. So I want to show you something. Yeah, so this is the altar painting, and this is obviously Mary Magdalene kneeling there in a cave. And on the left side of that painting you see a landscape. And we exactly found a ruin which looks like this, and we found a cave, and when you look out of this cave you see exactly that ruin.
So where she's kneeling in that cave, that's a real place nearby?
Yes, we believe so, yes.
And you can tell that by the topography, the mountains and the building.
This is how we did it, yes.
So you believe you found that cave?
We found a cave with the exact match of the background. If it's this the cave where Mary Magdalene was kneeling, we don't know.
So he was, as you come in, the first thing you see is Saunière showing you something.
That's right. This
that obviously he believed to be
might be the main clue, yeah.
Pat also believes that the priest left a hidden clue in station 14 of the cross. It traditionally depicts the body of the dead Jesus being carried into his tomb after the crucifixion. But here, there's a full moon in the sky, setting this scene at night. It was illegal for Jews to touch dead bodies after sundown. So was the priest leaving a subtle clue that Jesus hadn't died on the cross?
So it looks as though by putting that spanner in the works of having a moon where there should be a sun, he's calling our attention to the fact that what we believe about that event may not be what we think it is. And if this heretical information also included the historical information about Jesus Christ, which would possibly have shown the superiority or the importance, at least, to Mary Magdalene, do we find evidence for that? Well, what did he do after he made this alleged discovery in 1891? He creates a tower, the Tower of the Magdalene. The Magdalene's feast day is the 22nd. This tower has 22 steps, pointing at a degree of 22 degrees. 22 steps to one window that looks out unambiguously at a grotto whose ancient place name is the burial site of Mary Magdalene. He's calling attention to Mary Magdalene, and he's calling attention to the fact that the crucifixion may not have happened the way we thought it did.
Not everyone believes that the mystery is connected to the bloodline. Corhan Daraf runs the most popular Rennes-le-Château website, and while he thinks that there is a genuine mystery as to where the priest got his wealth, he thinks that the idea of a tomb of Mary Magdalene or Jesus in the area is total nonsense.
You know, everybody likes a good mystery, and people just come flocking here because they think that there's still something to be found, and there might be something to be found. You know, the idea that you or me or someone could go dig a hole and find gold or something, that is enormously appealing to people. And I think in the end that's what they're looking for.
But what is it that keeps bringing people back? You know, year after year, these people don't have much money, and yet they keep coming back and they keep digging.
I don't know. I think it must be in the atmosphere of the place. I mean, there's been so much going on here for the last couple of 100 years. There's been Templars, and there's been a crusade here, and there's been Cathars, and presumably Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and God knows what else. And people want to be part of that some way or another. And when they're here, they're sort of, you know, part of the picture.
Right, sure, sure. So you believe that Sonio did find treasure under the church?
I think he found something. I mean, something needs to have been there to account for the money that he spent. But if he found something, there has to be something realistic, you know. It has to be something you could hold or sell, or, you know, I think it's very unlikely he found, you know, the body of Jesus Christ or something like that. It's all so outlandish. But if you find gold or someone's belongings or furniture or whatever, you know, you can pick it up, you can sell it, and that will get you money.
And do you think that Jesus is buried here? Do you think there is a tomb, a family tomb? You don't believe that?
No. Very, very unlikely.
Armed with the clues that he believes the priest Sonnier discovered, Pat Jockle and his best friend Ronnie have spent nearly 15 years scouring the landscape looking for the tomb of Mary Magdalene and/or Jesus. He agreed to take me to one of the underground sites that he's discovered.
A lot of people, Pat, say you're wasting your time, that there's nothing here. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I know many people say, oh, it's just like in Scotland, the Loch Ness Monster, but there are so many rumors and so many historical facts. You can't dismiss that. So, and that's why we have people searching, because the history of this particular spot here is very unique. The Templars have been here, and all the heretical stuff started here, and that's why we think this is the right spot.
You have to admire their enthusiasm and belief. On a shoestring budget, Pat and Ronnie drive about 10 hours from Germany to Rennes-le-Château to spend all their spare time scouring the landscape and looking for clues to lead them to what they believe could be one of the greatest archaeological finds of modern history.
Okay, let's go. So, Pat, tell me a little bit more about this site.
Yeah, some people say it's related to the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. What is interesting is, if you go to the church in Rennes-le-Château and do some geometrical things, it's just drawing some lines, and in the landscape you have some landmarks. And those landmarks point to that cave, and we don't know why. So, yeah, we don't know how much important this cave is, but fact is, you can calculate this cave while using some clues in the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is it?
Here we are, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Ah, how do we get in there?
You just slide in and then you are in.
Right.
So.
Okay. Do you want to lead?
Yeah, okay.
You all right with the light?
Okay.
What do you think is buried at Rennes-le-Château?
In terms of artifacts, Prior Sign have always claimed that there is proof that Jesus was married. And one of those items might be carving in stone, some sort of record of the wedding, or some inscription but it would need to be supported by other items, and it was decided that there is a family tomb down there.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a bit tight getting in there, huh?
Yes.
How dangerous is what you do?
It's quite dangerous because we are all amateurs. We are not no archaeologists and no speleos. So it's just try and error. We just go there and there's a cave and we go in and or block it, and nobody has been in there.
So these are the kind of caves where you think there might be something buried, huh?
Yes, it could be. So it's one of the cave around Rennes Chateau, and that looks pretty amazing because it looks man-made. It's not, but it looks a bit man-made. If you see, it's all square shapes and so on.
It looks amazing. So this will go in underneath the mountain, huh?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
A shaft like this is very unusual for this area.
It feels like a mine or something.
Yes, but it's not a mine. It's a crack in the rock, but it's not. They never do mining here.
Right.
This kind of rock, which looks like.
I have to admit that walking through this underground passage near Rennes-le-Château, you really do get caught up in the excitement of what could have been buried down here all those centuries ago. And when you look at the almost flat walls of the tunnel and the chamber after chamber that it connects to, it really does feel like someone has carved out an elaborate labyrinth in stone.
You pinpoint something on the map, say, oh, there must be a cave, and really, indeed, you find there is a cave, and you go in and say, this time it could be the real cave, that cave. And we go in and yeah, like I told you, then you go out and say, okay, it wasn't this cave, but maybe in the next one, and you carry on and carry on, and okay.
Oh wow, look at that.
This is the end.
If I was burying something, Pat, that's the kind of place where I would bury something.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
See, no one's going to find that. If you buried it, and then what would you do? Would you brick it, get lots of
This is exactly where we're looking for a place like this.
What have they found, these relic hunters, the treasure hunters? Have they found anything significant?
I think they found a lot of rocks and dirt, and some of them have found bones or maybe some old coins. But I think the last real find, or the last real findings were a long time ago. I think in the last 20, 30 years, no one has found anything, but perhaps disillusions and a lot of disappointment.
But it doesn't put them off?
No, not in the least.
Ever the optimist, Pat decided to take Ronnie down a small shaft that they hadn't explored before. It was way too tight and windy for me, so all I could do was look on. But was this the moment that they'd finally find a tomb?
You okay?
Yeah,
What can you see?
it goes a bit further, but it's very tight inside here.
Is it too small for me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. There's another passage there. Water.
He absolutely loves it, you can tell, you know. His eyes light up when he sees a little gap to crawl through. But he's still as excited about it now as he was when he first started.
No, there is definitely the end. But it's quite big.
Quite big, did you say? It doesn't look very big from here.
Quite long. I mean,
Oh, how was it?
very tight.
Yeah? Yeah, I got that camera. There you go. What was it like?
Yeah, very tight. But, yeah, interesting to explore.
Yeah?
Yes.
Is it worth digging down there anymore, do you think?
No, I don't think so.
Are you surprised by the passion that the place seems to produce? People come year after year.
It is a bit mad, isn't it? I mean, this place is quickly becoming a religious Loch Ness or something like that. Am I surprised? Well, I keep coming back here, so I suppose I'm as mad as the rest of them.
What do you think is buried here, if anything?
I don't think there's anything left. But if it was anything, it's a treasure from the Revolution, made up of valuable stuff from the church and valuable items that once belonged to the nobility in the region here.
There's another twist to the bloodline story. In the book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and also in the Da Vinci Code, the authors claim that a secret society operating out of Paris called the Priory of Sion had guarded the descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene down through the centuries, as well as whatever evidence lay buried at Rennes-le-Château. A man called Pierre Plantard, claiming to be its Grand Master, recorded an interview in Paris for the BBC back in 1979, stating that Rennes-le-Château was indeed at the very core of the secret that they had protected.
Monsieur Plantard, is there still a secret at Rennes-le-Château?
Mais le secret n'est pas seulement à Rennes-le-Château. Il est aussi autour de Rennes-le-Château.
Will the treasure of Rennes-le-Château ever be found?
Ici, vous me parlez d'un trésor matériel. Ne parlons pas de trésor matériel. Disons simplement qu'il existe un secret à Rennes-le-Château. Il est possible qu'il existe autre chose autour de Rennes-le-Château.
It's fair to say that the Priory of Sion have a checkered reputation with historians and academics that lies somewhere between the Loch Ness Monster and the lost city of Atlantis. And yet there are many people in the world of Freemasons and esoteric groups who claim that they are very real indeed.
Its Grand Masters have supposedly included Leonardo da Vinci, Sir Isaac Newton and the French artist Jean Cocteau. And according to the authors of this book, there are secret dossiers relating to the bloodline just over the road here at the National Library.
These dossiers first appeared in the Paris Library in the 1950s, and although most academics dismiss them and the Priory of Sion as a clever hoax, the author Robert Howells has spent over a decade researching and investigating this secret society, resulting in what he says is some remarkable access to its inner circle.
The dossier secrets was a kind of pigeonhole for information where members of the Priory of Sion would deposit and share information. It was a kind of a clearinghouse in the 1950s where they could put documents in there, remove documents, and these would be circulated among members. One of the items that was found in there was a list of Grand Masters of the Priory of Sion, and this is a kind of esoteric wish list through history of Isaac Newton, Leonardo da Vinci's on there, all these alchemists, and going back to the bloodline families and Templar families at the time of the Templars.
Most people think the Priory of Sion is an elaborate hoax. Rob, what evidence have you found in your book to refute that?
They certainly exist today, and the amount of information that they have, the original information that they bring, belies that they have some kind of history of real intimate knowledge of these heresies and these secrets.
It has to be said that Pierre Plantard, the man claiming to be the Priory of Sion's Grand Master, had a history of starting up esoteric groups and publications, and was sentenced to 6 months in prison in 1953 for trying to sell Masonic degrees for large sums of money.
What do you make of the Priory of Sion?
The Priory of Zion is an extremely mysterious organisation, and the first of the mysteries is whether or not it exists. Now, if it does exist, if they are still around, there are people who claim to be members, but I would have thought that if they're as secretive as they would seem to be, if their purposes are best carried out in secret, then the last thing they would want is somebody to pop up and say, "Hi guys, I'm the new master of the Priory of Zion."
The Priory of Zion is a modern invention. It was an invention of the 1950s. But it wasn't, as most kind of critics assume, just a simple hoax. It was actually a cover story. It was a front. It was a front for other secret societies that had been around a couple of hundred years, not 1,000 years, but a couple of hundred years. It was a cover story to allow them to do certain things without basically revealing their existence.
There's no doubt that Plantard and his associates worked overtime creating documents and material to try and make the Priory of Zion look credible. The real question is whether the story that they were telling about the marriage of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, their bloodline and their descendants, was true or not.
I believe that Pierre Plantard was a fraudster, and the Priory of Zion, his inside joke. If you look at the context of what was going on at the time and who he's associating with, Philip de Cherici, these are people, and the culture supports this, who delight in taking the mickey out of their audience. That's what they do, and that's what this is. And I don't think they ever expected it to go on so long and to be executed so well. I bet they started it as just a whimsy of an idea, but it's so well executed. This is a long-term con. This is not the work of amateurs. It's a con, yes, but it's done very professionally.
There's another intriguing clue to the bloodline mystery in a church here in central London.
Tucked away off the bustle of Leicester Square is the small church of Notre Dame de France. Surrounded by Chinatown, nightclubs and cinemas, most people don't even know it's there. But it has one quite remarkable feature.
Jean Cocteau, the French artist and filmmaker, painted a mural here in 1960. Now, it is said that he was one of the grand masters of the Priory of Zion, which makes what he painted here that much more interesting.
He painted a huge mural of the crucifixion inside a small side chapel, but it was littered with bizarre elements. For a start, the person being crucified is not revealed, as we only see their feet. Was this a crafty reference to the idea that Jesus hadn't died on the cross at all? Equally bizarre is what some people think is the figure of Jesus himself, complete with the fisher symbol in his eye, looking back towards the crucifixion with a distinct frown on his face. Add to this the weeping figure of a young, beautiful woman, far too young to be his mother, but possibly his wife, Mary Magdalene, in a prominent position next to the cross. And to cap it off, Cocteau has painted himself into the scene, looking it over with what seems to be a wry smirk.
One has to feel a little sorry for Cocteau, because he was the real deal. He was an esoteric mastermind and an accomplished artist, and he was very well probably conveying a true heretical message in this mural. But I say poor Cocteau, because Cocteau is associated with the Priory of Zion. They said he was one of their grand masters, and of course he had nothing to do with them. So thus, this wonderful mural, which probably has really truthful insights into heretical information, gets sort of thrown and painted with the same brush as the Priory of Zion, which of course was all made up from the start.
One of the questions that's been nagging me since I started is, are there descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene alive today? Well, there are people who claim to be part of this bloodline, and I'm off to meet one of them now.
The Montgomery family say that they can actually trace their lineage back to the god kings of Mesopotamia 1,000 years before Christ. Professor Hugh Montgomery has spent most of his life looking for hard documentary evidence of this bloodline and agreed to meet me in a London hotel to show me some of it.
This is a copy, or photograph actually, of these Syriac Gospels, which are actually in a college in Cambridge, which are well known. They are the oldest known versions of the Syriac Gospel. Syriac is a version, if you like, of Aramaic. It's the Edessan and Nabatean version of Aramaic, which was the language which Jesus and his brothers would actually have spoken. So what we have is a 16th century translation. The important bits is the last bit. Josephus ex Marie genuit Jesu. Joseph from Mary produced Jesus, et echos fratris, and his brothers Judas et Jacobus, Judas and Jacob, et Jesu genuit ex uxore Marie de Bethany, and Jesus produced from his wife Mary of Bethany. Now we have a problem, but because there's a bit missing and we can't read it, but we know that it says Saulus Filia, so we know he produced a daughter.
This is the first time I've seen any evidence of children.
Oh, absolutely.
So this is reinforcing the fact that he was married.
Yeah, and that he had children.
And that he had children.
Right.
Hugh also showed me a piece of papyrus that is believed to date from the 4th century AD. Scholars have called it the Gospel of Jesus' wife, because within the Coptic text are the words, Jesus said to them, my wife. The academic world is split over its authenticity, and the Vatican has declared it a fake. But could this be the strongest written proof yet of a marriage?
Jesus had a normal family. He had a father, a mother, a stepmother, brothers and sisters. And normal human beings, particularly if you're Jews, and particularly if you're a member of the upper class, had to marry. Now Jesus actually says that he was, he taught in the temple. Under the Toranic law, you had to be married and have fathered a child to be able to talk in the temple. Otherwise you couldn't do so.
So an unmarried rabbi would have been unheard of?
Absolutely unheard of, yeah.
Well, I think the real victim of the cover-up of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene is not just the suppression of the sacred feminine, but it's the notion that one has to win out over the other. The sacred masculine is what's important. No, the sacred feminine is important. What we had with Jesus and Mary was an era, a moment in time when both coexisted. The sacred masculine and feminine need and belong to each other, one not more important than the other.
The $6 million question is whether there is any hard evidence to actually prove this theory. To some extent, all roads seem to lead back to the little village of Rennes-le-Château, and whatever it was that the priest Berenger Saunier discovered at the end of the 19th century. Unlock that mystery, and you might just find some real evidence about the bloodline.
The theory I think that I like the most is that he discovered something of immense value. Perhaps the tomb of Mary Magdalene, but whatever it was that Saunier found, would have been of great religious value to the Vatican or the Holy Roman Emperor.
Would he have wanted to keep it in the church, or would he have hidden it out in the mountains, you know?
Yes, maybe he took it and to take care of it, or he left it there where he found it and tried to take care of it.
That's it's kind of an inspiring view, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
I mean, you can imagine Saunier, you know, thinking, you know, I need to hide this somewhere.
That's right, yeah.
And that would have inspired him, right?
Yeah.
So if dozens of authors are to be believed, then Berenger Saunier, the priest of this sleepy village, did make a discovery so controversial that someone, possibly the Vatican, paid him handsomely to keep it a secret. Was it a family tomb of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ, evidence of the bloodline? Well, I've met many people who do believe that to be the case, but until they can provide concrete evidence to back up their claims, well, it's just as likely he never left the Holy Land at all. I'll see you next time.